hope I can live up to the billing. I mean, this has been quite a morning so far, but I do love being with manufacturing people. That's what I've done for a long time, and grew up on the farm. Agriculture and manufacturing, the two industries that create wealth. And my degrees in economics from the University of Kentucky, and talk about that a lot, how important it is to create wealth, and that when we lose our jobs overseas in those manufacturing jobs, we're now creating wealth in China and Mexico and around the world, and that's why it's so important that we get those back. Just quickly, you've got a little short bio about HR, EHS professionals. There's actually a third member out in Texas, Tammy Brashear. It's a small group of us. Our niche is, and this is only a commercial I'll do, we're really looking at a lot of smaller organizations that can't afford the big corporate guy or gal to come in and spend a lot of money, and help them out from organizational development, training, audits, whatever we can do. Tammy Brashear has really done a lot of work with startups out in Texas, and will travel if needed. This is just something we kind of all three of us are doing on the side. Dr. Drenner, she's also a member of the State House. She is our environmental guru. She really is an intelligent lady and can really help on some really complex environmental things. We've got a lot of manufacturing companies where I've been with stormwater and pollution control and some air permitting and things. Haven't had to really get into some of the big details of environmental compliance that she can deal with. And then I do more of the HR and organizational development work, and working with the changing the culture and helping out. So that's the end of the commercial on that. Jason and I, when we were talking about this, and he said, let's talk about what's going on in government today that's going to affect manufacturing here in Georgia. Yeah, we said today, I was hoping that the Congress would be, in the Senate would be a little further along on some confirmations, but they're not. But we still talked to David Perdue's office just yesterday evening on several things to make sure we had the most current stuff of what's going on in Washington. They're still very confident those confirmations are going to come. They just kind of got to push it a little harder. They're allowing the Democrats to slow down the process a little bit. But as we all know, January 20th on Friday at 12 noon, John Roberts started the oath of office, and we have a new administration. Environmentally, by 12:01, WhiteHouse.gov had no more references to climate change. I mean, that's a pretty quick message that there's a big change in our environmental policies at the state level, or at the federal level. It's going to come down here to the state level as well. Matter of fact, you've probably been hearing he's put a gag order on the EPA employees. As a official government agency, they're not allowed to tweet or communicate anything at this time until they get their new marching orders from what the new secretary is going to tell them that they're going to focus on environmentally. Now, as an individual, they still have their First Amendment rights and they can do stuff privately, but we know the last 8 years climate change. I mean, we had a president that said climate change was the biggest threat to the world compared to ISIS and some of the other things that are going on. So big change happened in Washington on the 20th. If you take the politics out, and whether you like Trump or not doesn't really matter. The good news is, if you believe in our republic, we've probably got the right person in there right now. Because for the last 8 years, you heard about executive orders. What you really didn't hear as much about were memos. President Obama really governed more by memos. He would just send a memo to the people, his czars and the other people he put in charge of agencies, and they would just do it. And you saw more regulations created than you've ever seen before. Not even with an executive order that had a tracking document, just because that's what he told them to go do. You got the guy that isn't afraid to sit there and write the order and say, no, we're going to just get rid of that and not do that anymore. Now, the problem we've got is still in Congress. Congressman Heiss, my congressman, member of the Freedom Caucus, one of the big things, and normally I don't have notes, but I did drop it off through because I'll try not to bounce around too much, but so much of this stuff is interchangeable, and the way it ties together, it's if I get going off in a rabbit hole, holler at me, I don't even remember how many times Congress voted to repeal Obamacare, which is a big thing that's affected businesses and your insurance rates and everything else. And they sent it to Obama knowing he's going to veto it. Well, by as early as Monday after the inauguration, they've already got Republican members who've been out there campaigning and talking about repealing Obamacare, that now that they've got the guy that's going to sign it, They're like, well, I don't know if we need to do that. You may have heard yesterday, 2 Republican senators actually introduced legislation in Washington that would allow the states to have an option to stay in Obamacare if they wanted to. And I've read most of the 2,200 pages. Again, without making a real political statement, it's bad legislation. 2,200 pages of junk thrown in there that has nothing to do with Obamacare. There's also an awful lot of things that let HHS Secretary decide regulations to go with this, more so than in most legislation. Well, that's Dr. Tom Price as the nominee, and we were hoping he would be confirmed by now, but he's one. We knew whoever Donald Trump put in that position and to repeal Obamacare is going to be at the forefront of that department. We knew that would be a tough road for anybody, and Dr. Price, I think, is doing well. And there's some confirmation hearings. If you didn't, strangely enough, you may not know this, his wife, Betty Price, is a member of the State House. So she's down there with us in Atlanta while he's up there being drilled by the senators, and so we get a pretty good commentary from some of the things going on. I'm not sure how she's handling that, seeing some of the stuff on the news. But
hello, good morning.
Well, Dr. Price and HHS, being charged with this, and if you read through this, they have to repeal it. You can't piecemeal it down because there's too much stuff in it. And then they talk about repeal and replace. Now, one of the things I know when talking to Congressman Heiss, they need to come up with something else besides replace. They really need to fix and work on our health care. And what they're looking at are 2 things, Medicaid and Medicare. Those are really the problems that started this whole situation. And you hear them talking about expansion of Medicaid here in Georgia, and we actually took that power away from the governor's office. So one person can't decide that. The General Assembly has to approve if we're going to expand Medicaid in Georgia. The House and Senate and by statute. When we talk about expanding Medicaid and what they're looking at Washington, first thing, how much can a person make and be Medicaid eligible? Anybody know? How many want to guess?
Can you make up to like 40?
If a family of 4, let's go with a family of 4, the average family size, in Georgia, Medicaid and Peach Care for Kids, how much can that family make annually, you think, for us, the taxpayers, to pay for that insurance for those kids?
50,000. I'm gonna go with 55.
60.
What do you have?
I've got it right here. Total $61,248, and we're going to pay for their insurance for their kids. How much expansion do you think we need? I had talked to Jed earlier. He's from Buckhead. Now, if you're in Buckhead in Atlanta, $62,000 a year for the cost of living down there, family of 4, you may struggle a little bit. If you're in the real Buckhead out in Morgan County, you're doing well at $62,000 a year, which is another part of the whole Medicaid problem is Washington mentality, one size always fits all. Well, there's a huge difference in cost of living in our state, much less the entire country, when you start getting in, some of these really expensive places, some of the cities. How do you balance this out? So what are they looking to do? Number one, the 26-year-old dependency, or dependents staying on insurance. I don't think we need it by statute, but the problem is insurance companies as a rule haven't played well. They just haven't. Some of y'all probably remember back when Congress had to actually get involved on pregnancy and pre-existing conditions that they had to cover those pregnancies where they were trying to say, no, we don't have to because it's pre-existing. Now, it's been 10, 12 years ago, I think, 15 maybe. But the insurance companies have found out, hey, we make money on these 26-year-olds. A 25-year-old guy, when I was driving, I wasn't going to the doctor. I wasn't going to use the insurance. But mom and dad would certainly pay that premium. And they found out that's a real money maker for them. So it shouldn't need to be in a statute, but it probably will be. The second thing is the pre-existing clause. You can't buy life insurance after somebody dies, and you can't buy car insurance after you have the wreck. But Obama thought you ought to be able to buy health insurance after you get sick. And I think what they're working on is some type of graduated system. First year maybe pays nothing, second year 50%, third year it's just like it was pre-existing. I don't know the exact timetable, but Congressman Heiss is on that committee, and that's what they were looking at. The other thing they're looking at you know, I'm originally from Kentucky. Up in Kentucky, they have a thing called KEMI, K-E-M-I. Anybody ever heard of KEMI? Any small businesses in there? Kentucky Employers Mutual Insurance. And what they did in Kentucky is they said, look, all these small businesses they don't have a big pool to spread the risk for insurance. So they get hit with higher rates and they don't have as rich plans. So they said, we're going to create a pool of small businesses under what they call KEMI and spread that risk out. What insurance companies like, big risk pools, so it has less impact. So they're looking at this more in the Medicaid, especially on the children. How can we put the children in a big pool, basically, to spread the risk? And they're doing the same thing and talking about this even with the individual family policy. You know, when I was a kid, I know, growing up on the farm, we had our own family insurance. So you had a family plan. Companies really don't sell that. They have those packages, but they're just not cost effective. So if they can put families and allow them to join a big pool to spread the risk out. So that's what they're trying to work on is they find a fix to the problems in health care after they repeal Obamacare. Now they'll call it replace. I think they'd be better off if they got rid of the word replacing, because that automatically people think they're trying to do again, government insurance type thing. And they're trying to figure out how do they get out of the insurance business because they're stuck with it with Medicaid and Medicare. And then that's the big 800-pound elephant in the room is Medicare and our seniors. And there's not a good solution that anybody's come up with other than, you know, to change what we're doing now. And as our senior population ages, they continue to have increased cost. It's a higher risk pool. You know, it's really an issue on prescription medicine. So that's where they're kind of going after, how do we lower the prescription medicine? Well, we're back to some of those regulations. And what can they just overturn by executive order, and then what's going to take statutes to do? Because the regulations drive up those prescription costs. And then the one that Congressman Heisen, he's a member of what they call the Freedom Caucus. I don't know if you've heard about that. The Freedom Caucus, about 37 of them, really constitutional, strict constitutionalists in their beliefs. When they look at tort reform, you know, we toured Flowers Bakery yesterday, as the Ag Committee did. One of the committees I serve on. Greg going to manufacturing, plant, and agriculture all together. I was really in great shape. But anybody heard of Dave's Killer Bread? Yeah, it's pretty neat stuff. Neat story out of Oregon. Flowers has bought it, the rights to it, and they're starting to make it now. Dave, this guy had been in and out of prison, and his last term was 15 years in prison. And his family, when he was a kid, was in the bakery business, and him and his brother got together. But one of the things they do is they keep over a third of their workforce is what they call second chance employees. And we're coming back from on the little bus we had, people said, well, why don't we have more second chance? The governor deals, you know, state employees, ban the box type stuff, and actually I had to explain to them, now, of course, there's a problem out there, what happens? We didn't do the background check, and we should have known, or we knew or should have known they were a risk. And therefore, they're going to hold us liable. And that's what the problem with hiring people with long criminal records. And, you know, they weren't familiar with that. But here out there, in Portland, now they did say at Flowers they do a very extensive interview process with the second chance employees, but they are giving them more of a chance. But it gets down to our court system, tort reform, the cost that goes into everything we do, and especially prescription drugs. One of the moves they're talking about in Congress, and they don't know whether they can get this done, and it's trying to put some common sense in. An example would be asbestos. There were asbestos plants years ago. When they were making asbestos products, they didn't know it was a problem in causing cancer and health risk. At some point you learn that. Well, what you do from there on, you should be liable in the courts. But what happened when you didn't know about this and you were honestly doing what you thought was okay, you shouldn't be punished for it. And that's the...
I was turning it off for you.
At least it's not on the left.
Thank you.
But And you all are facing the same thing on what to do. There's a lot of costs that are built in because of what our courts have done over the years and things like that. Now, from a business standpoint here in Atlanta, I don't think we're gonna see any religious freedom restoration bills coming, our First Amendment defense bills coming this session. Leadership's fought that battle a couple times now, and they, Governor vetoed it last time. But I think the key point is still, and what we haven't done, and don't buy all the stuff you heard on the news, the restoration, our defense, those are the two key words. We are restoring our First Amendment rights. Who from? Because of what the judicial branch has done, where they've infringed on them and taken them away, and defending our own First Amendment from our own judiciary. And that's really the message that they did in '93, at least for government. The federal law just simply says the federal government has to have a good and compelling reason before they interject themselves in anything dealing with your religious freedoms. And that's basically what the bill was supposed to do here in Georgia. Once it got out in the media and it got taken off in all different directions. But I don't think we're going to fight that battle this time. We will be Second Amendment bill, campus carry. Hopefully they'll do a better job of explaining. It has nothing to do with the school kids. I mean, you got to be 21 before you can have a concealed weapons permit. It's only 1% of our state's population anyway, and probably less than 1% of all the 21-year-old college students. But if I were to go over to the University of Georgia campus and just park my car, there's probably a good chance I'd be in violation of the law as a weapons carrier. I have my weapons carry permit. Most of the members of the General Assembly do as well. Unfortunately, the nature of the world we live in, we do get confronted every once in a while, and it happens. So, but I think that will come up. I don't think that'll really have a big effect on you, anything to do with business going on. Get back to EPA regulations coming out of Washington. Of course, they're going way down. The war on coal is over. Does anybody remember when President Clinton went out to Utah and made Monument National Park in Utah, and the people out there weren't even really wanting it and all that? Anybody know why he really did that?
There's an oil reserve there.
Well, oil, but there's even something better. It's also the home of some of the lowest sulfur coal in the world that now cannot be mined. If you're going to go after the coal industry, well, first thing you talk about is the sulfur emissions. Well, you go where there's low sulfur coal, and then you put it where they can't get it and use it. Now, a lot of damage done. Georgia Power's closed the 2 coal-fired plants here in this state. Of course, the plant Vogtle, the nuclear plant, continue to expand down there. So we've lost some energy producing, but a lot of the other things, especially in the Northeast where coal is still a little more prevalent, it's going to help them come back. It's going to help business. And you've seen a lot of the things. I mean, we closed a new record. What was the Dow closed? Over 20,000 for the first time ever. I mean, business is seeing there's a positive outlook. We believe that things are going to get better. We know these regulations are going to go away. They can't go fast enough for us, but they're going to go away. OSHA, one of the things I do is an OSHA outreach trainer. Anybody been through the 30-hour class in the last 5 years? Remember in the introduction to OSHA, one of the things the Obama administration mandated, there's quite a bit of talk about unions and how great they do. And there's a mandatory handout with union contact information. Boy, that's not what I want to do in Georgia, is go into a manufacturing plant, do your 30-hour training, and tell all your employees you haven't trained how great the unions are and you need to contact them for safety. But they put that in there. That's something that's coming out. I talked to Senator Perdue himself on that one, and as soon as they can get that one taken out, and it's just a swipe of the pen to do that, to change that requirement of that part of the training class. OSHA is going to move back to actually trying to help businesses. When you look at our accident rates or death rate, they did, since the 1970, when the Steiger Act was first passed, they have come down and improved. But we've kind of plateaued, and then we go up, and we plateau, and we go up and down. And really, you almost see it, if you really track it with administration, when the Republicans get in and they try to put in plans, more outreach, how do we help you make sure you have a safe environment? We do better. Democrats come in, they get more into the audits, the fines, the attack. rates go, and incident rates go up. Because you're more into, now you're running a safety program just to comply with regulation to keep from being fined, as opposed to really keeping people safe. And in, I don't know, ladies from Clarion Metal, they know this, you've got to do all this training before they go out there in the plant the first time. Day one, that employee has no clue to even some of the vocabulary going on in your manufacturing plant, won't retain it, won't remember it, but we're going to have them sign that paper so if OSHA shows up and says we did the training. But then how do we really train them? And I tell people all the time, that's education, not training. All right? And we got to do more training and outreach to make sure we really create that safe environment for our employees. And that's what the OSHA secretary, the assistant secretary of labor is going to get back to, and what the Trump administration is looking to push, is getting more outreach out there. Your OSHA outreach officers out of the local office are hopefully going to be more active and putting on more small seminars and classes and really here to help business. And that's going to be a good thing for all of us as we move forward. Sorry, read my notes. Oh, yeah. Anybody ever heard of the hospital bed tax?
Oh, I have.
Yeah, hospital bed. We got to renew it this time. And you'll hear all about it. We're going to renew the hospital bed tax. All right. This is where, when we start intertwining federal and state, it's really called the Medicaid Provider Program. We're back to our good friend Medicaid. Why is our federal government $20 trillion in debt? David, I'm going to make you a deal. I want you to give me $2. And every time you give me $2, I'm going to give you $6.49 back. Now, how often and how fast do you want to do that?
Start right now.
Yeah. That's the Medicaid Provider Program. We're going to do this, what we call the hospital bed tax. We're going to collect a little over $200 million to send to Washington. And for that $200 million, they're going to send us back $649 million. That's why 49 states do it. Alaska being the only one that doesn't because they have so much money because of the oil pipeline. But that is the Medicaid Provider Program. And where does that money go? Well, the biggest recipient is going to be Grady because of the engine and care. That's how we pay for our Medicaid engine and care. That's what the Medicaid Provider Program is supposed to do. Does it make sense on any level at all at the federal government to take in $2 and give you back $6.49? No. But that's exactly how that program works. You know, and we'll hear it on the news when we talk about the hospital bed tax and all this, and there'll be some people, and you know, as they negotiate rates, it is somewhat like we talk about corporations don't pay taxes, they pass it on. And yeah, the hospitals do pass it on in different ways, but they're also negotiating fees and rates with insurance carriers. So it's not, they don't have as easy a time if you go up 3% on gasoline tax, you know, Exxon and all of them are just going to raise the price 3%. Hospitals can't quite do it dollar for dollar, but in the same way, it's really the patients are paying the tax and have been for somewhat 8 years now. But to get the $649 million back, you know, this was the hospital associations themselves came up with this plan and asked us to implement it, you know, because they got to have money. Without this fee, Grady is in trouble. I mean, it really is. And Grady being the head of, you know, the big engine and care, not picking on Emory. Emory's a great teaching hospital, great university. Their indigent ER plan, stabilize and put on MARTA to Grady. They really don't put them on MARTA, but that's really what they do. They're going to stabilize them and they're going to get them to Grady. That's what their business model calls for, because that's not what they do. But Grady does take in that indigent care, and that's what we got to have there. So all these stuff's intertwined. That's why we're sitting here looking at this first 100 days and our budget right now. You know, what are we going to have to react to? What's going to change out of Washington that we haven't heard about yet that's going to change money coming into the state, because it may affect our budgeting process? Because we're going to talk about our $25 billion budget, which will be the largest in state history. And if you didn't know this, that's the governor doing that. We can't, under our Constitution, the governor tells us how much money is going to come in, and we have to budget that. All right. And we'll put more in the rainy day fund, we'll put a lot more in the Move On When Ready and programs like that, which has been a great program for our kids. And that's where you've got kids in high school doing their first year of college before they graduate high school, getting those classes done, and the Move On Ready programs, where that money is paid for that. So we'll put extra money in there if more kids need it. The money will be there, but it's the same thing you do as a conservative family. As you save money when you have more coming in, you put money away and only spend it if you need it type stuff. The rainy day fund, we'll put it in. We don't get to determine how much, we just get to determine where it goes. So matter of fact, we're voting out the little budget today. That's why, once I get out of here, the amended current year budget out of the House. They'll go over to the Senate, they'll mess it up, but we'll fix it in conference committee. But we've got to be looking at all these dollars changing coming out of Washington. The Freedom Caucus, they would love to get rid of that Medicaid provider program. We talk about how messed up Medicaid is already, and then here you're putting this kind of drain on the financial part of the federal government system of Medicaid that doesn't even apply to anything else that they're doing with who they're covering. It's just the indigent care part of it. What else do we have? Really, the biggest thing that we're going to see also then is what's going to happen in our interstate commerce, and this is really big. Obama put a lot of registrations and constraints on there. And I got an opinion, I put my opinion everywhere, and it starts even with the Affordable Care Act, but a lot of things the Obama administration did was to make the states subservient to the federal government. He believed that the federal government was the answer. States were out here, we do our own thing too much. We push back. We believe in the 10th Amendment of the Constitution. He really didn't. So he put in a lot of registrations to how can the federal government get their nose in the middle of anything going on between the states. And we're going to see a big pushback on all those regulations. I don't know, from the trucking industry is one that's been hit very hard with them. Different tax things. And that's one of the things that I was talking to the senator's office about last night, is he said a lot of those things will be rolled back, and people won't even notice that you may start seeing some of those prices drop. We've also got unemployment. How many people are familiar with the U6 number? In my opinion, the U6 number is the only one to pay attention to. It really is. The Obama administration changed the way the unemployment rate's calculated, and that's typically what they call the U3 number, to make it sound better when you want it to. The U6 is unemployed, underemployed, those who've left the workforce, even if they've gone back to school for additional training. It's quality people that could be out there working that aren't. U6. We're still at about 10% in Georgia right now. You heard we went up a little bit on our U3 number. If you heard Mark Butler, our U6 has been staying right at 10%. During the height of the recession, Michigan was the worst. They had over 26% of their working population unemployed or underemployed. You go up there to McDonald's or Wendy's and you recognize very quickly, here was a professional, serving hamburgers, because there was no other work to be found. Is that one of the few states that actually lost population because people left because there just wasn't work to be found. And from that point, one of the things that we're working on here is how do we get the labor force that you all need? And I'm not here to fuss at the millennials too much, but from a manufacturing standpoint, this millennial generation comes in with a whole different view on things. We were talking earlier, they'll sit there on their computer till midnight, but being at work at 8 o'clock in the morning is a problem. I had one young man in a manufacturing plant, good guy, had the education, brought him in as a leader, part of the leadership team. Getting him on there on time was a real issue. And his response to that, he said, well, yeah, I was wanting to tell you, your work schedule is really not conducive with my lifestyle. And that's not uncommon that these younger people, we got the trophy for participating generation coming along. And we're going to have to deal with it. As we We want to be the #1 state in which to do business. We want to attract these quality businesses. We need to do a couple things. Number one, we need to make sure our young people understand it's the green of the dollar, not the color of the collar, that really matters. Good quality job. I mean, we pay, you know, under the technical college system, we pay for a welding certificate. Down around Savannah, getting close to Jacksonville, good quality welders can make well over 6 figures. And they can't get enough of them. That's why that's one of those programs that we added, that the state will pay 100% of the tuition for welding. Truck drivers, you can't get enough CDLs out there on the road right now. That's another one the state pays. There's 12 certificates right now. Nursing, set design for the movie and television industry. You know, we're number 3 now in the nation in television and movie production. Only trail California and New York. And to the point, California actually had billboards put up out there, you know, basically trashing Georgia. Please don't go. You know, they're tired of seeing Eagle Rock distribution. They distribute alcohol, but they also have a huge movie set production up in here in Gwinnett County. So I told you, I kind of roam around. There's so much of this stuff that's changed. You got a question?
Yeah,
Tell me the hook already?
No, you're good, you're good. What, as a HR professional in the manufacturing space, what are the top 3 to 5 things that you identify as we need to prepare for the next administration coming through?
Well, not just the next administration, but we're right there with the millennials. I was telling somebody, there's a book I really like to manufacturing supervisors to read called Raving Fans by Kim Blanchard. It's a little Howard Reed. It's kind of comical with a fairy godfather named Charlie and all this. But it talks about 3 keys, but one of it talks about is who are you? You are who you are. And when you got these millennials coming in, if I am somebody that's an 8 to 5 job, I need that person in the chair 8 to 5 every day. That's who I am as a company. And they need to understand when they're hired, this is who we are. And that's not something we're going to change. If we're something else that, hey, if he wants to work till midnight on his laptop, it's about not being busy, but about being productive. If that fits our world, that's fine. It's just like in Loganville, there's a Hill's family-owned Ace Hardware within a mile of Lowe's and Home Depot. Their service, what they sell, they're good at it. They don't have the appliances, they don't have the carpet, they don't have everything Lowe's and Home Depot have, but they stay in business because they know exactly who they are, and what they're delivering is that service and help and things that you don't get at the big box stores. And you pay a few pennies more. Okay. But it's their business model. So one of the big things, make sure who you are and deliver what you're doing. And these millennials, you know, some of them will have to adjust if they're going to fit in our world, but we have the jobs. They don't. That's what they're wanting. The other thing is the turnover. Millennial generations, they're going to try, they like kicking the tires. They're saying now, I read just yesterday, that most millennials by the time they're 30 years old expect to have 5 to 7 jobs. Wow. Staffing people are sitting there going, he's not telling us nothing we didn't know, did he? Yeah, I'll try this for a while. Oh, and like, yeah, okay, I'll try this. And that's okay. They're very mobile. They're wanting to do things different than we are. The idea of been in the entire career, 50 years, getting the gold watch at retirement is just not what they see themselves doing. We're going to see big change. We're seeing the regulation changes. They're going to be all helping us. That's the second thing. Just regulations coming down, down, down. And thank goodness, like I said, we got the guy that's not afraid to use his pen to get rid of the memos and executive orders, because Congress is too slow. They're not as bold as we need them to be. Because once we get them rid of, then we're going to have to really get on them. And this is where we need people involved, especially in Washington, telling them we need to put stuff in statute to keep people from just doing it by regulation and executive order. The president's job is to enforce laws, not make law. Yeah, we had one that clearly was making a lot of law, and you know, regulations are supposed just to be enforcing the law. Immigration, we haven't even talked about that. The new I-9s went in effect now. they're not a big change, it's not a big deal, just some paperwork adjustment for your HR staff that's probably going on. Immigration was a big part of Trump's campaign. If you're hiring illegal, or if you're not doing your job and making sure they're here legally and allowed to work, it's going to come back to get you. That's going to be a big push out of Washington. I've heard that from everybody I've talked to. Go after the employers, because if the jobs aren't here for an illegal alien, there's no reason for them to be in this country, especially if we then also take away all the medical, the Medicaid and Medicare that they're all getting. There will be a push by a group of them to eliminate the anchor baby. Actually, there was a Supreme Court ruling that the Congress has kicked the can down the road for about 40 years, where the Supreme Court said they didn't really say that just because somebody made it here and delivered a baby that that child have to be an American citizen. They basically dumped it back in Congress's lap and said, you need to look at and fix this and decide what you want to do. And they just have ignored that and allowed it to continue and then expand with the family members that could come and join. So there's going to be a push that they really, for the first time, address that, and because we're the only country that really has that. You know, I remember when in 2010, Congressman Woodall was running for office and debating on television. He got a question about that, and he said, you know, what woman wouldn't do everything she could to get across that river to get her child born in this country and be an American citizen? You know, and he's right. And until Congress does something to change that, you know, and there's a push finally that they're going to look at that Supreme Court ruling that said you all need to really address how do you want to do this. But employers hiring illegals or people that aren't documented to work here legally is going to be big by the end of the year, and they're going to come after you for doing it.
Tom,
Yes.
question.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of moving away from DC and looking at the state of Georgia, there's been a series of wins going on for a number of years. Georgia's gotten really good at bringing business in, big investments. You know, Baxter, State Farm, obviously up in the perimeter area. You name it, no shortage. What do you see as we've seen other states like South Carolina getting more competitive, Alabama's getting more competitive? What's next for Georgia to continue that trend? What are we doing to continuing to be like what we've done in the film industry? We're number 3, right? California and New York are the only ones ahead. What are we doing, especially from a manufacturing standpoint, to continue to have that edge?
Great question, because you know we've done this lot of things where we took the sales tax off energy for manufacturing. What the governor wants to do, and again we mentioned the labor force, and that's really start. You know, I'm close enough to. It's now Baxter became Baxalta, which is now Shire, out there in Walton County. There's not going to be 5,000 qualified workers to fully staff that plant with the skill sets they need. This is a not biohazard, biomedical, there you go. Biomedical company, they're dealing with blood plasma and blood as they're out there on their plant floor. You know, they're talking about a plant average of between $50,000–$65,000 a year for a plant worker. You know, well, you got some guy making $10 an hour in a metal plant, thinking, man, I'll just go over there. Well, he doesn't have the skill set. He doesn't all have work. So we're going to see a lot more, I think, that's one of the big pushes we're going to see. In the governor's education package that he's supposed to be rolling out is, again, how do we put more emphasis on getting our young people, the students, prepared for a job? You know, anybody else in HR here? You see it right there. Young people ready to work? Do they have the skills? No. They got a high school diploma, may or may not mean a whole lot depending on where they came from. And so what can we do? And that's going to be a thing. Now, our Commissioner of Labor is a constitutional office elected separate. A lot of states is a governor appointee, so they don't always work together here on the same page. So, but from the governor's seat, he's trying to push that our Department of Labor to get more involved and also work with, again, Richard Woods, our school superintendent, to get it back into the schools, into the high schools. Again, that like I said, it's not the color of the collar, it's the green of the dollar. Get these, you know, we still have 28% of our jobs. Statistically, they say need a 4-year college degree. 20, 30 years ago, a lot of people come out with high school or less and go right to work. Today, they're talking about 60-some% of our jobs need more than a high school degree, whether it's training you give them, or some technical college work, or something more than just that high school degree to really do some of the things you want. And that's what you're seeing like at Shire. And that's what the governor's program on education is talking about, is how do we get this workforce development done. So that's what the companies need. We've got the resources, we've got a lot of things in place as a state. I mean, Georgia brings everything that a company could want as a state to locate here if they can get the employees. If they can staff their facilities, this is the place to be, and they know that. And that's the biggest thing that I talk to economic development directors around the state. Here in Walton County, they say the same thing. They want to know about your school system, what kind of workforce they want to get into the other facilities and come visit and find out what kind of employees they can hire there. That's the biggest driver that we've got to fix. Yes.
Tom, on that note, I know there's a lot of emphasis in the workforce development in the younger, bringing up the high school and college age group. I'm seeing a lot of disenfranchisement of the baby boomer age. I mean, there's a lot of those that are underemployed or unemployed. They're kind of dropping off. And that's a sector of our demographic that you go, well, a lot of those people are college educated. A lot of them have worked in business. So they're not going to require the same amount of training that somebody, the millennial that you got to get there at 8 o'clock in the morning. They already know that. Is the state doing anything to promote companies to kind of, incentivize them to push that segment back into the workforce?
No, we're not. But when I talked about knowing who you are and knowing what you're dealing with, you got a millennial that's going to go through job after job after job till they kind of find something they want. And even I spent 18 years with Ligon Platt. Moved around the southeast some. That's what company brought me here to Georgia in 1989. When I left, after I left there, one of the things I found out later is a lot of people said, you were actually there too long. People were scared that you didn't know anything but that one company. And these millennials kind of take that to heart that, 5 to 6 years is what they want to do, and then they move. Well, as a manufacturing company, we like long-term, quality, stable employees. Yes? Yeah. And you talk about the baby boomers, the 50-year-olds, 55-year-olds, good quality job, they're looking for the one that they're going to retire from, to be there the next 10 or 15 years. Mm-hmm. Typically what's happened in HR, we always say, well, this guy's only got 7 years left before he's going to retire. Well, this baby boomer, or this millennial only wants to work here 3 to 5.
Exactly.
Again, think about, we got to change our mindset in the hiring world and what we're doing. This person may be within 7 to 10 years of retirement, but you're going to get a lot of experience, you're going to get a lot of stability, you're going to get a lot of everything that you're wanting for. They are trainable. And this young person, they're probably not going to be around that long either, because it's just not the mindset they have now. From a state point, we're not really pushing that. I'm not sure exactly how we do that, but there are a lot of programs, again, with the educational system for free that they can go back if they need additional training, if they need to change directions in their career. That's one of the things, there's those 12 programs we talk about in the technical colleges. And these are where companies and manufacturing industries have come to us and said, we have a shortage, we can't find these people, welders, nurses is a big one. Now in technical college, we can only do the LPNs where the hospital's all one RNs, so it's still a little bit of a disconnect, but we can generate more LPNs. The movie set design and builders is on there, the CDL drivers. I probably should know all 12 of them off the top of my head, but I don't. But again, those are available for any age group. But you are right, the senior, the baby boomers, great employees that we need to encourage more employers to hire.
Tom, can I do a follow-up? That's a great, I love your angle there, Lynette. We have a lot of conversations with highly experienced boomers that have been pushed out of their roles, and mainly for healthcare costs that the employers are seeing. Would there be any way, especially given the skills gap that is alive and well, especially in manufacturing, where the states could possibly offer some sort of credits for organizations that retain that critical talent?
Well, they could, again, and then you brought up the other part, kind of talk about the benefits, and a lot of these boomers are in there for benefits. And what's gonna happen as they get rid of, in my words, the Unaffordable Care Act.
Right.
I mean, you've seen the cost increase of $10,000 deductibles, and a lot of people working for that benefit as much as anything. All right, I was a big believer of the HRAs. Familiar with HRAs, health reimbursement accounts. Company, Certainty, they funded $2,000. And now that my preventative care was covered, and then my next $2,000 of expenses were paid out of that fund. And if I didn't use it all, it rolled over. They could cover my entire deductible, because the next $2,000 was deductible. All right, so that HRA plan, and why they work is it changes the mindset of the person who has it. I spend that fund money as it's my own money, not just let insurance take care of it. Too many employees I've had up in Walton County, you ask them who their family doctor is, and they'll tell you the emergency room, and that's where they went. And of course, that's the most expensive care there is, and that's why the insurance companies put penalties or high deductibles on emergency room visits. But the HRA plans allow people to really grab hold of that money, treat it like it's their own, understand how it rolls over. So we had a guy at Dietrich Industries, they not only covered allowed it to roll over to cover all their deductible, but also all their copays. So he had been in it, young guy, never went to the doctor, rolled over enough money that he could have had to hit by the bus, $1 million bill, and it wouldn't have cost him a dime, because the fund would have paid all his copays, all his deductible, everything. That's how much money he collected, because he understood, I just don't spend this money, it just keeps staying in my account. Health savings account, what we can do to encourage those, and tax breaks and tax benefits will be good. But again, it all starts in Washington. What are they going to do as they get rid of the Obamacare? And that's going to be important that we help that go forward. Because again, the seniors, they do have more medical needs typically and statistically than the older generation. So if that's a drain on a company's insurance, and especially a big corporation where they're self-insured and just have a third-party administrator for catastrophic and things, it really changes their hiring as well.
Tom, how are you seeing marijuana and manufacturing going together since our last meeting? Tom actually did a great training right after the cannabis oil law was passed. I had a lot of guys, some of you guys in this room called me up and said, hey, my guys are telling me they can go out back and smoke a little dope on lunch break. Is that right? Saw the governor deal signing something. And within 2 weeks, we were able to bring Tom Kirby in, and also Chuck Wade from Drugs Don't Work. And he came in, and we were kind of hearing both sides of the conversation. So now you got the whole platform to yourself, so you can tell it however you want to tell it.
Well, Chuck,
Which is always right.
no, Chuck says it right too.
Yeah.
The goal is always the same. We want a clean pharmaceutical grade CBD oil, because I have trouble saying cannabinoid and all that. CBD oil for those that need it. That will really help them. And the results with the seizures and every disorders are wonderful. If it's done right, somebody could be on CBD oil every day and they would pass any drug test you give them, because the marijuana that when you test is THC. Now, if we're going to ever get it right, again, FDA, Washington D.C., CBD oil has been granted orphan status, which means they can run tests. States can run tests and different research on it. The rest of the world's approved CBD oil because it's non-hallucinogenic.
Hallucinogenic?
It's not a hallucinogenic, yes. Benign substance that helps with these seizure disorders. The THC is what causes the high that the recreational users want. Now, a synthetic blend called Marinol has been approved by FDA for years that prescriptions can be issued for if they need it. Glaucoma was the one that comes from eye diseases. You hear about. You know, when they talk about somebody who's been prescribed marijuana for their glaucoma, it's really supposed to be Marinol, not that they're out there smoking. That's what they're supposed to. That's how it's supposed to work. The CBD oil, what we're pushing is to get a clean pharmaceutical grade, but and we allow those with a valid prescription from a doctor to possess that in Georgia under state law. Under federal law, they're still in violation. Now, also, they can't grow it, cultivate it, or get it here in Georgia. Now, Colorado, again, it's a violation of federal law. I mean, the feds won't go into Colorado or any of these states that have approved all this recreational use of marijuana and bust them under federal laws. All right, states saying it's okay, we're going to leave you alone. The federal government under Obama just ignored it. And the problem is they really aren't, it's like they don't know what to do to address it in Washington right now. So we send somebody out to Colorado, they go out there to get the CBD oil for the child they have that has seizures, and then they got to drive across all these other states, and at any time they could be stopped and arrested for violating their state law or federal law. So we're actually causing our citizens to be lawbreakers of state laws and of course the federal law as well. But it does work. The success stories of CBD oil, there's one in my district, and the child's probably about 8 years old, I think, and the grandmother was, when she called me, she was really almost in tears. She said she had her first Christmas this year because the seizures were so bad. She was just really not cognizant of the world around her, but now because of this and what we've done, she only has 1 or 2 seizures a day. She's a typical more 8-year-old little girl running around, and she really, as grandma said, had her first Christmas. And the success stories make it all worthwhile. Now, how do we do it? We continue to push it to state. This really has to be addressed as a federal issue. We've got to make it where federal law allows these people under doctor's prescriptions at least to get a clean pharmaceutical grade, that we have a way to grow it, cultivate it safely. From the ag world, we hear about GMOs, agriculture, that's all we've done for 1,000 years is genetically modified everything we eat to make it drought resistant, bug resistant, grow faster, bigger, whatever. So there's really no such thing as non-GMO, but we use that same technology. We can grow a very low THC grade plant to cultivate this oil. Now, under that research status, the University of Kentucky is one of the leaders right now. Kentucky was really hit bad with the tobacco companies and everything going on. In Kentucky, you could literally have a 1,000-acre farm back in the heyday of big tobacco, have a half-acre tobacco plot, which was a pretty good size. You talk about tobacco in pounds, not acres, but a half-acre was a really big plot, and it would pay for the entire farm. You would make money on that farm just from that half-acre. Right? They lost all that, so they've been struggling. Well, that same half-acre of low THC marijuana for CBD oil is even more valuable than the tobacco was. And the people in states like Kentucky that's really leading the edge on some of their research in lowering the THC levels, because that keeps the recreational users from wanting to harvest it, because it doesn't have the levels of THC to really get them high. It generates the CBD oil. But also, hemp is a byproduct where the hemp ropes and things that were, of course, big in World War II, and the whole hemp industry. Hardy plank, fiber cement, siding. A lot of that fiber is a cardboard type stuff. The hemp would be even better for it and make it a little more. If you know anything about that, the biggest problem is the expansion and contraction of siding during the winter and summer, especially the farther north they get, where after a while you have big gaps. Well, the hemp will work better than the cardboard, according to the research, to keep that smaller. So there's a lot going on with the CBD oil. There's a bill coming up where, if you didn't know this, we do poke fun at each other from the House and Senate. Of course, they ruin everything on the other side. So, if you have a senator that's a good friend, he'll tell you the same thing about us. But there's some things that we really do look at differently. On the House side, we really say when it comes to this CBD oil, we're not doctors. Let the doctors prescribe it for whoever they think it will help. Well, the Senate thinks they're smarter than everybody else, and they've got a list of, I think, about 8 conditions they say it's allowed to be prescribed. There's others that would help. Autism, they say, would help, and they don't have that on the list. So the bill this year that we're going to see is trying to increase that list, because the Senate won't just let doctors do their job. But we'll continue to push that. We're going to continue to push Washington, because we've got to get the fix out of FDA to really make this work and really help those people in need. I know I've rattled around for a while. Whatever question, somebody had a question back here, yes.
So we've been talking about the getting our workforce ready. You know, there's a talk about in 2020, U.S. again becomes #1 in manufacturing, according to some of the pundits, and there's structural issues about how do you get folks trained, whatever. What do you see happening at the federal level, Department of Labor, and the Georgia Department of Labor, and the educational systems? How's that being transformed today as you see it?
Well, let's start with the state. I think you're going to see more of that, exactly what you're talking about, getting the workforce ready. How we're going to do that, most everybody knows the Quick Start program in our technical colleges. They're kind of hidden gems in this state. When you talk about the #1 place to do business, the one thing we've got that a lot of states don't have is some of those programs our technical colleges deliver, like Quick Start. When you expand, you bring in things, and we're going to have to expand that type of program. You know, you've got to bring in so much capital or so much new to be eligible for Quick Start or a new startup. We need to just be able to deal with changes in the workforce, changes in the manufacturing lines, to where those people can be retrained, what we can do to help drive that, just like the Quick Start program for changes out there. You know, Edward Deming in his last interview talked about carburetor companies. You know, they make better and better carburetors, more efficient carburetors, and making carburetors. Who makes them now? Nobody. There, it's all fuel injected. All right? So companies that were on front of these things and helping train those employees and using things like a Quick Start and developing the new products and what they're giving them the creativity. And we're going to do that through our technical colleges, and that's a push here from our labor department. That's one of the biggest things we've got to change. You know, right now we talk, the only thing you ever hear about from our Department of Labor in the state's about unemployment. We got to get on the front end, working with our schools, working with our school superintendent, working with their technical colleges, you know, to get more training, to have that workforce ready. From the federal level, the Department of Labor, I really don't know. They haven't done much to help us in the last 8 years at all. And you know,
That's true.
Yeah, we're expecting changes, but I haven't. That's not one I've really been, with everything else going on. That's not one I've really been on top of. But I think a whole lot of what you're going to see in this next 4 years and possibly 8 is more and more stuff going back to the states where it belongs. At Freedom Caucus, Congressman Ice is more excited than I've ever seen him. I mean, his first year up there under the Obama administration, I think he called me every week for about 2 months because he was just so disillusioned that he said, you know, every morning I don't even know what fire I'm going to have to fight today. It's just ridiculous. Now, hopefully Trump won't be like the old saying and, you know, forget his intentions to drain the swamp when he's up to his butt in alligators. But he's going to, you know, they're going to fight him on things. There's too many people in Washington, and this is straight from several congressmen, that are there for the lifestyle, not to do what the people's work. You know, if you didn't know it, your state representative, state senator, this big paying job we've got is $17,000 a year. Theirs is $174,000 a year. You know, and all the perks that go with it, including flying back and forth and the parking spaces at Reagan National, and they've got staff up there and staff back here. We have a suite of offices with 8 of us in there. There's one full-time administrative assistant to answer the phone. During the 40-day session, they bring in a temp, so there's 2 of them for 8 of us. You know, that's our entire staff. So it's basically just us. So, but I think you're going to see a lot of push from the Trump administration and the Freedom Caucus and those that are there for the right reasons to push things back to the states where they belong. And in that case, that workforce development, the things that we're doing, I think are going to pay more and more dividends.
Well, I would interject too, because you and I were talking about the apprenticeship programs that are
Yes.
coming through. Both the German apprenticeship and the Department of Labor also has a separate, the GDOL is also promoting the apprenticeship program. So I think that will assist the Quick Start and the workforce development.
So I have a question. I do a lot of work in Tennessee because the grant money for training is very simple to get. And basically, how do you, and also I'm starting to look at the federal tax credit with R&D, because if we change processes, that's part of the change in new development for R&D. So that's a federal tax credit that pays for 100% of training inside a company, as well as 60% of the trainer, whether it's a consultant or whoever. So there's some federal tax credit stuff out there, but I don't know, how are we as states taking best practices and trying to gain from that?
Well, how we do it as a state, probably the best example here in Georgia is the Southern Legislative Conference. Every summer, there's the 15 southern states from Virginia to Texas and Oklahoma. We get together for about a week, and that's exactly what we do. And the speaker actually put me on one of the standing committees of that SLC. And different. Now I'm on the ag committee. You know, with agriculture practices, conservation of land. You know, that we talk about. There's a different group that will be addressing that, and that's what we do. Is they share what they're doing. You know, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. What works, what doesn't work. It is bipartisan. They're very interesting because sometimes I know we were out in Arkansas a few years ago when how they implemented some insurance things out there a little different. Boy, well, depending on what side of the aisle they were on was the version we got from the Arkansas legislature. So we got what works, what doesn't work from both views. And somewhere in the middle is kind of where it probably is once you take the politics out of it. But we do a lot of those things. You talk about a huge one I'd like to really do. You know, I've had several people in the oil industry talk about how many different blends each state has of gasoline. And if the southeastern states, where we have about the same type of heat and humidity all the time, we go down to have one winter blend and one summer blend, 80 to 90 cents a gallon could probably be saved because they're having to inventory all the different blends. But every state has their own environmental people that think they're smarter than everybody else's. I mean, California alone has over 148 different blends of gasoline they use. Wow. That's why California prices are always the highest in the country. You know? But so those things from state to state, there are different groups. There's also ALEC, which tends to be a little more conservative group. There's one that's a very liberal group. National Conference of State Legislature is a fourth group. So we do get together, we talk. We also just have, and not only from those contacts, other contacts we made. You know, I've talked to people in Tennessee about some different bills and legislation that comes along. We get a lot of things. If you don't like to read, you don't want to run for office because not only we talk about all the 1,500 bills we got to read, but all the magazines and emails and everything we get, but you find all of a sudden, hey, man, look what Wyoming did here, you know? So this might make sense to call the author of that piece of legislation, talk to them, how did this work? Tennessee's got a lot of good things going on. Of course, their whole tax structure up there without the sales, or without the income tax, other only on certain things. Their sales tax, and there's some other things happening now that they're really struggling with. I don't know, everybody remember the transportation bill, and we got, a lot of people got beat up on different, who you listen to on how much and what we did on that to fund road improvements. Right now, we are the envy of the country. Our, Jay Roberts, with the planning director of Georgia Department of Transportation, says he almost can't get anything done because every state's calling, how did you all do this? How are you getting the funds to improve your roads? And if you drive around the country, you see a lot more orange cones and barrels on things neat here in Georgia, and there's a lot of really bad roads in the states around us that you drive on. So.
On transportation infrastructure, obviously, like you said, there's a lot of things great in Georgia, ports, highway system, you name it. There's been different proposals I've read about maybe different corridors that be added to take a lot of the 18-wheel traffic off of the main 285 and whatnot. Any update on any projects you're aware of that might alleviate some of the, especially a lot of traffic away from the Braves Stadium? I'd like to be able to get to catch the first pitch, the park, you know, get all three kids a ball cap. Any updates on any new projects you're aware of?
No, because right now, all the projects have been more on maintaining and fixing. Our bridges are still in really tough shape, and that's a big part of that fund, that we've got to get bridges safe to handle traffic and also handle big truck traffic. The Port of Savannah is huge, third busiest seaport on the eastern part of the United States. We've got to be able to hold those big new ships coming through the Panama Canal when they get that expansion done to keep that up. you know, a lot of money's gone in there, and of course, we had to push the federal government to keep live up to their promise and their commitment they made, and fortunately, we were able to do that. Heavy rail, especially from Atlanta to Savannah, is going to be a big topic. That's one that they're already talking about. And as far as road transportation, it's one, and the one I really like because it affects where we are, is somewhere out east, 85 down to 75, crossing over 20. Probably somewhere out in Madison way on 20, that far out. But all that truck traffic on 85 that goes down to 285 and then down 75 or back going up to the northeast, that's one that might have some more reasonable cost. You know, we heard, a lot of you have heard of Northern Arc for years, 20 years we've heard. 20 years ago, if they would have bought the land and done the things before all that continues to grow out there, they could have done it. Now it's impossible to build a Northern Arc, but out on the east side to eliminate and help some stuff, that's one. The other thing is, and this is something I've actually advocated for years, and you know, when I grew up on the farm and took care of a bunch of show cattle and pulling a big cattle trailer all over the country, you went through a city and, you know, what's all the signs say? Trucks must use right-hand lane or right two lanes. And that's where all the cars are getting on and off. And out west, you've seen some changes. Tulsa's one. Through trucks, use left lane only. Kind of the same principle as the HOV lanes. But the trucks that are just going through town over here away from all the cars getting on and off all the time, it's a big safety change. And they've seen a big improvement in the big truck wrecks in the cities, because most of the time when there's a wreck with a truck and a car, it's probably the car's fault. Because the truck can't stop quick enough. So there's some safety things like that. Of course, you just saw the big expansion on 75 that's getting ready to open the toll lanes. I'm not a big fan of the toll lanes. All right, but people like them in some degree, so I think they may be coming. The last thing on taxes, I will mention before I close, because Jason, I can tell now, getting ready to give me cookies too. There's been 17 bills introduced in the State House dealing with taxes already in 7 legislative days. Most of them are bad, and all of them have been introduced by Republicans. I mean, just because we got an R behind our name doesn't mean they're going to do what's best for you. They're doing it for this person or that person or something. That's why we know food, you know, different groceries aren't taxed, but you know, candy you pay tax on. Did you know Kit Kat's not candy?
That's healthy, right?
Kit Kat bar is not candy. I mean, that's why we have goofy stuff like this, because we have 17 bills and something, you know, sneak through. So I always ask everybody, you know.
Chocolate. Isn't it chocolate?
It's a cookie.
It's a cookie.
It's a cookie because it's got that wafer in there. So yeah, it's not candy, it's a cookie. So we don't tax cookies, that's food. So, but yeah, pay attention. If you hear something on the news is all about sound bites. We live in the details. All right, if you got a question, call your representative, call me anytime. I'll tell you what's in there. You know, if you pay attention to things, you've got a question and concern, you know, we're here to help. As I tell everybody in my district, we're part-time legislators, but we're your full-time representatives. So we're there for you to talk to and anytime you need us. So hope I didn't ramble too much, but thank you.
A quick plug, we're working with Tom, Jason, and GMA and AFIC and Town Stream. We have a OSHA 10-hour class probably in March or April, right? A couple webinars kind of leading up to that, 3 webinars, and then the OSHA 10-hour class, which we've heard a lot of feedback on April. So we look forward to that, and I'm sure, if anything, we'll get plenty of that information out to each of y'all.
And trust me, we will get some communication to you. Well, we got a couple things. I know Tom is like, they're about to gavel him in, so he's got to be getting in the road real quick. But I wanted to open this thing up really, really fast. This is going to be rapid fire. You guys have never done this as fast, I promise. But I need you to go through this really quick. Your name, your company, and what was your favorite part. And it is going to be rapid fire. Do not get lengthy because he's got to go out the door. What's your favorite part?
I liked the quote